Welcome to the channel. My name's Rob and I'm learning everything about Australia. And did you know that nuclear testing actually happened on Australian soil? Well, now you do, but let's find out a little bit more about what happened.
Outback Australia isn't exactly the busiest place. But around 70 years ago, there were some big things happening out here. And I mean, big. Yeah, I wasn't kidding. Back in the 1950s and 60s, there were some massive nuclear tests out there. See, after World War II in 1945, when the first nuclear weapons were dropped over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the world was shown the true power of nuclear, everyone wanted a slice of the atomic pie. And so started the atomic era. Britain was one of those nuclear-hungry countries.
Why does it always have to come back to Britain? I know I live here, but I want no part of this, okay? I want no part of this nuclear disaster that is probably going to happen at some point. It is not my fault. Don't blame me just because I'm from Britain. That's all I'm going to say.
Countries, and their government needed some wide open spaces to develop their weapons. I wonder where has that? Bingo, Australia! So, in 1950, the British PM, Clement Attlee, went to Aussie PM Robert Menzies and said, "Hello, old chap, would you mind if we blow up some things in your desert? You know, for science." To which Menzies, who wanted to maintain a good relationship, said, "Ah, sure, go ahead." Britain conducted its first 3 tests in the Montebello Islands and Emu Field in 1952 and 1953.
Now, I know there was obviously the nuclear testing on Christmas Island, which is just below Japan, isn't it, I think, or that direction. So it's not quite that close to Australia. Really, what was actually happening, if you look at the map, is Emu Field. I think the English were just trying to help out the Australians with their war against the emus. I think it was all innocent stuff, just trying to help the Aussies against the emu menace. That's clearly what it was. But no, in all seriousness, look, I know Australia has a lot of wide open space. I think we've gathered that in the last few years of me exploring Australia and visiting. But just because it's wide and open doesn't mean it's lifeless, because there is life throughout Australia, throughout most parts of the world. Places that may seem quite deserted aren't necessarily deserted, just deserted from humans. But it seems a little bit crazy because there is life there still.
Before moving to Maralinga in South Australia, which from 1956 became the home of 7 more major tests during Operation Buffalo and Operation Antler, and up to 600 smaller tests. These tests happened right up until 1963, when nuclear tensions around the world hit boiling point following the Cuban Missile Crisis. World leaders came together to sign the Partial Test Ban Treaty, which banned the testing of nuclear weapons underwater, in the atmosphere, or outer space, as well as pledging to work towards an end to the nuclear arms race, welcoming a new era of world peace.
But while the tests ended, that wasn't the end of the Maralinga story. In fact, it's still going today. And to understand why, we need to get a little scientific.
Well, we're going to find out, hopefully. But I appreciate that people got scared, right? People got scared, the Cold War times and all that, the missile crisis and everything. And it was probably quite scary for a lot of people. And what do people normally do when they feel threatened? When people feel threatened, they normally make themselves bigger and be quite aggressive, right? So that's why countries were trying to develop the nuclear missiles and bombs and things to an extent that it will stop. It's a deterrent most of the time, right? And that's what it's still used as now. It's a deterrent because we know that there are slightly loopy people on this planet that have access to these dangerous weapons. So you have to have a deterrent to say, well, if you're going to do it to us, we'll do it to you. And maybe at some stage, it will be a crazy enough person that says, fine, and presses that button. And so then we press the button and then everything is gone. And I would like to think it wouldn't happen, but you just never know, because when nuclear weapons are used, no one wins, right? No one wins.
These are nuclear weapons, like the ones tested at Maralinga. They contain radioactive elements like uranium-235 and plutonium-239. And when you split or mash the atoms of these elements together, they release a lot of energy. And if you do that just right, it equals a Big Bang. Like, really big.
I would stop there and just say, yeah. And there is a place for this, right? There is a place for this. What he just said is you bang those together and it creates a lot of energy. And they are working on this to try and solve our energy problems. And I think they probably will get there at some point, to some extent at least. So these things can be used for good. And it's just making sure they're not used for bad. But how do you stop those bad people using it for bad? And who is the good and who's the bad people? Oh, the questions, the dilemmas, the conundrums going on.
Some of the bombs tested in Maralinga caused mushroom clouds that reached more than 14 Ks into the sky. But in those clouds were a whole lot of radioactive particles, and winds blew those particles everywhere, even as far as Townsville. The Maralinga site and surrounding area was blanketed with dangerous radioactive material.
Too much radiation can cause major health problems, including deadly diseases like cancer. But it was out in the middle of nowhere. What harm could it do? Well, a lot, actually.
There were around 16,000 on-site workers and many Indigenous people in communities around the site, all of whom were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation.
In 1967, British authorities tried to clean it all up. But in 1984, Australian scientists found they hadn't done a very good job, and major radioactive contamination was still there.
The following year, the Aussie government launched a royal commission into the tests, and it found that very little effort was put into protection and monitoring radiation levels. Traditional owners were also not asked for permission to use the land, and many Aboriginal people weren't warned of the danger or removed from the area, leaving them exposed to radioactive fallout, which they called the Black Mist. It led to another massive cleanup effort, costing around $101 million, and $13.5 million in compensation for the Indigenous people of Maralinga.
It just stinks of the big people not caring about the little people, right? And we see this in so many walks of life where, you know, these big businesses and big governments will, they just don't care. They just don't care. That's all I have to say. They just don't care. And that seemed what, you know, maybe they were doing these things for the greater good, maybe, but without actually thinking who it's affecting, who the negative, what the negatives are affecting. And it always happens, right? Always happens.
All of that didn't stop the long-term effects though. Veterans and Indigenous people of the area suffer higher cancer rates than the rest of the population, and many have ended up getting really sick and dying. 2012 and 2013 saw huge class action lawsuits spearheaded by British and Aussie veterans against their governments, saying their human rights were violated.
I love this country, I served this country, and now I feel I've been abandoned by the country. There's no doubt in my mind that the scientists working on the experiments knew the risks to us, but they chose not to tell us the truth.
Their argument was shut down though, as the UK Supreme Court ruled that too much time had passed for them to prove that their illnesses were caused by the testing. In 2017, the Australian government agreed to provide better healthcare for both veterans and Indigenous people of Maralinga. And today, most of the site has been cleaned to a standard safe enough for people to go visit. But some areas still contaminated with plutonium-239 won't be habitable for more than 24,000 years.
So while the Maralinga nuclear tests disappear into the pages of history, their effects will live on long into the future.
Really, really interesting. I knew that the nuclear tests were on, say, Christmas Island. I didn't know that it was on the mainland in Australia. And like it says, the radiation, it blows. It blows in the wind, right? Just mad. And I think if we're looking at it these days for what good nuclear can cause, what the positives are, there are clearly positives for the world that we live in now, where we need clean energy, and whether or not you class this as clean is a separate issue, maybe. But if you can get those atoms and whatnot to bash into each other and create massive amounts of energy in a safe way, then this is what we should be looking for. It's the big issue, though, of, as it talked about at the end, the plutonium, I think it was, buried. It will affect the area for thousands and thousands of years. Well, if we're using nuclear as an energy source, and we develop it and the technology gets even better, what do we do with the waste? Does it simply get buried very, very deeply? Probably, I reckon so. It's fascinating. Did you know that Maralinga was a site for nuclear testing? I bet lots of Aussies didn't know. And I bet if anyone else is watching from around the world, I bet you didn't know either, because I certainly didn't. Another really, really interesting video about a situation that's happened in Australia. And I cannot wait to come to Australia again in less than a month. Oh my God, it's less than a month. I cannot wait. So make sure you like and subscribe to this video, but also subscribe to Charlie and Rob, or you can go to charlieandrob.com to see all our vlogs, the vlogs that we've been here, Poland, Charlie's been in Italy, Charlie's been in Portugal, and we're coming back to Australia for even more vlogs. So thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and I will catch you next time.